Hey there guys, I am the Six Machine and welcome back to another Warhammer video. So this is one that's been a long time coming. I said I would do it ages ago and I just never got round to it, but with the release of Heresy 2.0, I thought now would be a good time to finally get it done. So today it is happening. We are ranking the Traitor Primarchs, from my least to my most favourite. And just a quick reminder, this is just based on looks. I know that some have better rules than others, some are much older than others, but this is just purely on which of them I think looks the coolest. So I am sorry if your favourite is low down on the list, I am just obviously not that much of a fan. But without any further ado, let's dive right in, and starting off at number 9, we have got the pretty boy himself, Fulgrim. Yes, it may come as a surprise to some people, but the perfect Phoenician is all the way down in my number 9 slot. And the reason for that, aside from his, let's be honest, really goofy side leaping pose, is honestly just his face. That alone just ruins the entire model for me. It is genuinely awful. I really do dislike it. I think it makes him look haggard and tired and gaunt and just totally unlike the perfect, gorgeous being that he's meant to be from the lore. And I know he is in the middle of battle, so I should be giving him some credit and cutting him some slack, but he just looks so uninspiring and dull to me. And those are two things which, at the core of his character, Fulgrim should 100% not be. He should look like he is glowing and perfect and glorious even in the midst of battle, but to me he just looks old and ugly. And I have to be honest, this is probably one of my least favourite models out of the entire Forgeworld range because of those few details. I just think it is so bad. Next up we have one of the oldest, in fact he may well be the oldest Primarch model we have, and that is of course Angron himself. And yes, I know Angron and Fulgrim are both very old models, so that is definitely a factor into why they are arguably so bad compared to some of the newer ones. But to me, Angron just seems to be lacking the wow factor or the presence that the other Primarchs have. Yes, sure, he has a menacing face, and the display stand is pretty brutal, to be fair, but his pose in general just doesn't quite grab me in the way I think it's meant to. And whilst he is still definitely taller than the Marines around him, of course, he does look a little hunched over and squat and small compared to the more recent Primarchs, so he doesn't look anywhere near as imposing or terrifying as I kind of imagine the Red Angel to look when I read about him in books. And again, whilst it's better than Fulgrim, he does still have the issue where I think his face is not quite on the same level of detail and quality that we see in the later Primarchs. It doesn't look as bad as Fulgrim's, but it just looks a bit weird. It looks a little bit poor quality and dirty and not quite intricate enough for a Primarch model, I think. And so for those reasons, he is all the way down at the number 8 spot for me. And here's where I have to say the rest of this list is actually quite hard, because aside from those two, I really love the rest of the Traitor Primarch models. I think they are all really pretty damn good. But of course, this is a list. We do need to put them in some kind of order. And so, in number 7, we have poor old LORGAR. Now, LORGAR definitely has a love it or hate it model, I think. It is, I admit, fairly boring and static if you are looking for a more dynamic pose, but I do think it lends itself quite nicely to being just a solid centerpiece to your army. If you want something dynamic and something with a bit of action, then yes, you may not like this, but I do think that him standing there stoically like that does actually look pretty good in the middle of a Wordbearer's force, just, you know, watching over his army as the battle unfolds. I am not a huge fan, again, of his face. I think it looks a bit plain. I would have liked to have seen a bit more bling and, you know, runic carvings and maybe some candles or books on his armor, but he isn't awful by any stretch, and I do actually rather like the story that his model tells. I think when you read about LORGAR and you know about him in the lore, it's quite a fitting image for him, and I think he does work quite well in a Wordbearer's force with that sort of slightly less action focused but more thinking and calculating and introspective pose that he has. Up next, we may have a bit of a surprise because I think a lot of people do love this model, but for me, next in line is Horus. Yes, the War Master himself, yes, he is really imposing and powerful looking, but I just really don't like his pose. I don't like him pointing with the mace in the way he is. It's less like he's directing his troops into the enemy, which I think it's meant to do, and more like he's throwing open his cape to sell you stuff, like that merchant guy in Resident Evil 4, if you ever played that. I just can't help seeing that whenever I look at that model. It's like you've just walked up to him and he's thrown open his cloak, and he'll have some guns and some, med packs and ammo hidden in there, and he's going to try and sell it to you. It looks a bit janky to me. I think maybe the one thing that would fix this is if his head was just looking in the direction of his mace. Then I think it would come together quite nicely, and you could sort of see the image of him directing his forces and leading them onwards towards the battle. But as it is, I just think it looks really odd with him looking in that direction and pointing his mace in the other, especially the way the cloak kind of billows out between it as well. He does have some good things going for him. I do like his wolf pelt. I do like the detailing on his armor. It is very cool. I just think as a whole model, it doesn't quite come together in one complete pose for me. And so it ends up just looking a bit more comical in some ways than inspiring. In 5th place, we have Magnus, and he is one of the more recent Primarchs, and you can tell because the detailing and the design is much better if you compare it to, say, Fulgrim. He does look huge and imposing, and I love the detailing on his armor, the way his dynamic base shows him harnessing that psychic power into a spell. Even his arm raised forward directing it gives this model so much story and purpose and like narrative behind it. You really do feel that he's in the middle of a battle and he's just flinging all sorts of psychic powers and wiping out squads of Marines with his, psychic mastery. And I think of all the things, whilst the model itself is really unique and kind of different to the other Primarchs, which does make it stand out, I think what grabs me the most, more than anything, is that storytelling aspect, because I think for Magnus, they've done a really, really good job on it. And as we've seen in some of the Loyalist Primarchs as well, it's not just the model itself, but it's the base and the story that the whole kind of model tells, including the scenic base. I think that's what really makes a Primarch model a great one rather than just a mediocre one. And Magnus, to his credit, has got a really, really great story in his design. In a similar vein, although I will admit to not quite the same degree, the next Primarch on the list also has that storytelling going for him, and Perturabo is, once again, so well designed to show that story off. The model itself is really chunky and cold and menacing, which I think is great because it's exactly like Perturabo is meant to be. He has almost no, ostentatious trim or mementos or bling. It is just sheer efficient brutality, and I really do love that for his model. His hammer looks great. His raised arm ready to fire into the enemy just fits his pose so well. And what I also really love about this model, like Magnus, is his base, which once again just shows his story incredibly well, standing on top of that ruined knight chassis, which has pretty much been torn apart, presumably by Perturabo himself, and then simply used to help him get a better view of the battlefield and unleash all of his terrifying firepower. I just love how he almost seems to be treating the wreckage with disdain, like he's not a glory hog, he's not proud or boastful that he's just taken down this knight like you would imagine Fulgrim would be. It is just cold, calculating efficiency, and for me that really, really is encapsulated across the entire model and his base in one brilliant sort of narrative storytelling arc. In 3rd place, we have the Pale King himself, Mortarion of the Death Guard, and whilst I know a few people aren't keen on this model, I personally love the whole Grim Reaper aesthetic he's got going on. The cowl he has, the scythe, his pose, he just looks like he's about to swing and cleave through an entire 10-man squad of Marines like he's cutting wheat. It is such a cool, dynamic, powerful pose. I really do like how, like Perturabo, the design is relatively simple. Mortarion, like Perturabo, isn't in this for glory or honors. He's just there to do his job, and he is going to do it incredibly well. I like the throwback to Barbarous with his chemical rebreather style backpack, and whilst this is more the paint job than anything, I love how he looks grimy and dirty and his face is pale and gaunt. Like, he does look like death, like Nurgle has already made its claim on him and it's beginning to infest and corrode his armor and his very being and soul. It's such a great design, and honestly, he's one of my favorite Primarchs to see on the battlefield. The last two Primarchs are actually really tricky because I really love both of them, but unfortunately in the number 2 spot, we had to go for the murderous Batman himself, and that is of course Curze. There is a hell of a lot to love about this model. I love the depiction of mercy and forgiveness. His lightning claws, they are just so brutally evil looking compared to the other lightning claws that you see on other models. I like his adornments of flayed skin and skulls. It all suits KONRAD just perfectly. His armor even looks segmented and stealthy in a way, which I think has a really cool effect, you know, to make it show that he is really good at moving stealthily and quietly and get behind his enemies and kill them without them ever noticing. I think that's a really nice touch, and the armor design does kind of play into that narrative quite a lot. His cloak made from human skin is, I think, one of the most horrific things we've ever seen from Forgeworld, and I adore the detail they've put into making it. It just looks genuinely awful and grotesque and disgusting. And I mean, even his base is fantastic. Like, he's just waiting for his victims to pass before leaping down and eviscerating them to join the pile of corpses which is already at his feet. Even his face, compared to some of the other Primarch models, really does suit him, I think. He looks unkempt and crazed. Like, even in his eyes, the detailing on the face just brings that imagery of craziness and, you know, instability to the model. He looks genuinely murderous, and you can just tell that he's lived most of his life in the darkness, slowly growing more and more insane as his visions rack his thoughts. It is just all around a gorgeous and truly fitting model for the Primarch of the Night Lords. And then so to the number 1 spot. Yes, in first place, to I'm sure some people's surprise, we have the sneaky Lord of the Hydra, ALPHARIUS. Now, as I said, this was very close, but to me, ALPHARIUS is the clear winner over all of the other Traitor Primarchs. I love the scales. They are an iconic, cool design feature for the Alpha Legion. I love his helmet, which reminds me of a sort of ancient mythological Atlantis-style design with the bright gem in the middle and the sort of Hydra head on the top. The Hydra heads on his backpack are a gorgeous touch. And then, of course, we get to his spear, which again plays into the almost aqua motifs he has going on with that pronged semi-trident design, and the way he's just casually using it to impale that marine who looks like he's desperately trying to crawl away from him. It's just so merciless and cruel, but also so unbelievably cool. I really, really do love every single aspect of the model, from the armor design to the helmet to the backpack to the pose to the base to the spear. It is just all round perfect, and it is easily the coolest traitor model we have ever seen. Now, there is of course one final Primarch before we finish. That is the brand new redesigned Horus, and I really didn't want to include him because he's so new and he obviously looks so good compared to some of the other models. I do love Horus Ascended, and if I was to put him in the list, he would probably fit in somewhere maybe 2nd or 3rd spot, in all honesty, because I really do love Curze and ALPHARIUS, but Horus would definitely be up there. I didn't think it was fair to add him in over the current Horus model that we have, so I may redo this list one day when we've got a few more redone or redesigned Primarchs. But for now, yeah, Horus Ascended would probably be maybe 3rd spot, I think, just because of how evil and dark and menacing he looks compared to the current Horus model. But I won't include him now, so we have got the current Horus, who is in the number 6 spot. Horus Ascended is not in this list at this point. But that is it for today. What do you make of my list? Is it similar to yours, or do you have a totally different order? Let me know how you would rank them in the comments below, and as always, thank you very much for watching. Please do like and subscribe for more Warhammer content from me, but until next time, I'll catch you later, guys.